All right, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to get to moderate this panel today on impact and core strategy. There's already been different panels around how to align your investors and having good DNA and risk assessment. And we have three founders with us today who've had to deal with all of those scenarios as they've built really successful organizations and companies. I'm Kathy Pham. I am one of the advisors for Startups in Society, and in the past have also started an incubator at Mozilla and ran the Responsible Computer Science Challenge at Mozilla and teach a product class at Harvard. I'm thinking about how to build responsible products. And today I'll have each person go ahead and introduce themselves because they do a much better job than myself. And I'll have each of you share a little bit briefly in about 2 minutes, your name, your organization, and let's start with how do you define impact? But we have with us Leo from SourceMap, who thinks about supply chain transparency, Sofia, who has built a delicious food company called Tiny Organics with a very scientific approach to really think how we feed our kids. And Diego from Pachama, who thinks about reforestation and the really, really important issues around carbon emissions and climate change as well. So Leo, how about we start with you? Tell us a little bit about you, the company that you've started, and how do you think about impact?
Yeah, hi, I'm Leo. I'm the founder of SourceMap. SourceMap is a company that came about over the past 10 years. Really, we serve a very simple purpose, which is we help companies and consumers find out where things come from and choose products based on their social and environmental priorities. And I guess in a nutshell, the surprising thing to me as a product designer and somebody who was trying to buy sustainable goods is that there's very little data out there if you actually try to compare. And I thought this was because consumers didn't have it. It turned out also companies don't have it. So we've built out a business that's kind of in two ways trying to bring transparency to supply chain. First, trying to get some of the biggest multinationals in the world to actually be accountable for their raw materials, so the whole supply chain out to where living conditions, environmental conditions are very different, and then to get them to then communicate that information to consumers in a transparent way so that we can all make more informed purchasing decisions going forward.
Great. And how do you think about impact when you just hear it means so many different things? What do you think of when you think of impact?
For us, impact is it's the ultimate reason that we do this. So bridging some of the biggest social and economic inequities in the world through a network that brings everybody together. And I think of all of the problems we're trying to solve are connected, whether it's on the consumer side or the producer side. So it's just a matter of connecting them. But the company is definitely a mission-driven company. Everyone who works here is there because of that. And our consumers, our customers are there too. Right? So we're all working together to define the impact that we have the opportunity to make through supply chains and then to enact it.
Great. Thank you. Sofia, what about you and Tiny Organics?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited. Yes, I'm Sofia Laurell. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Tiny Organics. So we do organic baby and toddler meals. The big mission for us is really shape the palates of the next generation to prefer and love vegetables from the earliest days. I oftentimes go on this rant about baby food. It's actually a fully invented category in the 1920s, and there's really no reason for the very sweet options that you see out there. Oftentimes, it's a myth that baby food needs to be either strained or very sweet. And it's pretty shocking. Only 10% of children in the US get their daily recommended amount of vegetables. A majority of that is through French fries. So I do see that this opportunity is, there's to create meaningful impact is couldn't be bigger. We launched the company a few years ago. We founded the company with an early stage seed fund called Human Ventures, which I'll talk about as well. But their big goal is to solve big human challenges, and what's bigger than changing the way children eat. And in terms of impact, I honestly think, to Leo's point as well, it's our duty and our honor as entrepreneurs to build companies that help build, humanity forward. And, our big North Star at Tiny is, we're pure D2C currently, but is to be on WIC, which is the food stamps for women and children. Mm-hmm. And this is pre-pandemic, over 50% of parents were on WIC. And, that percentage is even higher now. So, for us, I wouldn't be doing this if impact wasn't, a massive part of it. We wouldn't be here without that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing a little bit about the work, company, and a history and science lesson on baby food, at least in the United States. Thank you. Diego in Panama, tell us about that.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, Kathy. I'm Diego Saez Gil. I'm co-founder and CEO of a startup called Pachama. And what we do is we use technology to help drive more funding to reforestation and forest conservation projects that are sequestering CO2 from the atmosphere and unlocking one of the most important solutions to climate change, right? We need to, of course, move away from fossil fuels, but we need to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And there is no better way than restoring forest, which not only can sequester hundreds of gigatons of CO2, but it also, of course, can restore ecosystems for endangered species, can provide food, medicine, and income for local communities around the world. And the technologies that we use are satellite images and artificial intelligence that we apply to measure and monitor what is the carbon impact of these projects that receive carbon credits, and then to connect corporations that are seeking to reach net zero as part of their climate action plans with landowners and project developers from around the world who are doing the wonderful work of stopping deforestation and restoring forests. And I am a serial entrepreneur. I started 2 other startups before. The previous ones were not impact oriented. And I got to learn the importance of having from the beginning a clear mission around impact. And in our case, we measure that impact on tons of carbon that get retired from the atmosphere. But we also, of course, focus on the holistic impact of what does this mean for local communities, for other species that are going to be affected by this, and for all the stakeholders that, in a way, get affected by climate change, right? So that's the way that we think about impact.
Great, thank you. We'll have a question in a bit about business interest and impact, because as you know, a lot of early career startup founders sometimes even see those as two conflicting things, or they can't do both at the same time. So thank you for raising some of those questions as well in your intro. I'll start with individual questions for each of you, and then there are a few questions that we'll dive in for all of you that I think are incredibly relevant. And so, Sofia, let's start with you. So you mentioned in the past that you've taken an approach with Tiny Organics that is a very scientific approach, and you've collaborated with the Tufts School of Nutrition and Policy, and really had the foresight to think about that in your process of building out the organization. So can you talk about really how you even got started and your motivation for building your product that way, of bringing that kind of expertise in, of rooting it in nutrition, and then how did that relationship play out?
Absolutely. So when we first founded Tiny, as mentioned, we had started researching the history of baby food, but also food systems as a whole, especially in the US. I'm originally from Finland, born and raised, and there's a movement called baby-led weaning, which is all around essentially introducing finger foods or baby-led feeding. And research shows that the more flavors and textures you introduce to little ones or babies and toddlers before the age of 2, the more adventurous eaters they become. And there's something called the flavor window between 4 and 7 months of a human being's life when we're the most open to new foods and new flavors and new textures and new smells and new tastes. And I touched on this earlier a little bit, but human beings have also an innate preference for sweet foods. So for us at Tiny, really we look to introduce vegetables and healthy flavors in a friendly and fun way. And we partnered with Tufts School of Nutrition and Policy since day one. And actually, Darius Motsafarian, the dean of the school, is our scientific advisor. And this has been really key as we've been building. We call it like a programmatic approach to child development, where each core ingredient benefits a nutritional stage for your little one. Kind of carrots for eyesight, healthy fats for brain development, and so forth. And it's also really interesting. A lot of people don't know this, that by the age of 2 years old, a baby's brain is about 80% of its adult size. So really, there is no, the first 1,000 days is really in a human being's life the most important. And we wanted to kind of make those first 1,000 days, we wanted to add a kind of an achievable and an empowering goal for mom. So that kind of resulted in the first 100 flavors, which we also track on the back end on our website, and it's really exciting. We have some exciting developments there as well. But for us, this is the science-based approach is just so key for us, and you see it in some of our other partnerships as well. We partnered with Michelle Obama's Partnership for Healthier America, which is a sister organization to Let's Move that she founded in the White House, and some other partnerships as well. And they've really, I think, propelled us to where we are today. But yeah, really, 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 really key time in all of our lives, those first 2 to 3 years.
It's so great to hear how you're able to bring in the expertise in the beginning and weave it in throughout the organization, and how critical that is to really understand all the context that we're building in. So thank you for doing that. In the Vietnamese culture, we also have a lot of baby wed weaning. So baby food is kind of a weird concept. Why don't you just give them, one of your videos, I think, you should just give baby real food when they're ready to eat.
I know. Humans were thriving for millennia eating real whole foods.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, without purees. So that's wonderful. Thank you. And Diego, you have really gone through significant lengths to think about whether the reforestation projects you support are actually additive. So really understanding if they really are helping, which some companies just don't do, right? It's sometimes more fun to do the activity part than actually understand if it's really additive. And then if it creates value for the indigenous communities that you work with. Can you talk more about that and your process and thinking and keeping your employees motivated and what that looks like?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that we found when we started researching this world of forest carbon credits was that while it sounds like a great idea, right? I mean, let's send money to plant trees, right? Who can oppose that idea, right? It's actually full of challenges, right? And the challenges have to do with the fact that a company in Seattle has to send money to a group of farmers in Brazil or in Kenya. And how do you make sure that you can claim the actual carbon sequestration that happened additionally, as you said, that wouldn't have happened without that funding, right? And that the projects continue to do what they are supposed to do over time. And the problem in the past was that because of lack of trust or because of some few bad apples, the entire credibility of the framework was put into question, right? And the danger is that in this moment in time, in which we don't have a lot of margin for error on unlocking solutions to climate change, the next 2 decades are essential to revert the causes of climate change. It is a real danger that forest carbon credits could not succeed. So what we're trying to do is to bring extra transparency through providing these maps of satellite images of the forest projects, and then to use the best available artificial intelligence techniques. And I have a team of incredibly smart engineers building algorithms that can predict how many trees are there, how much carbon do they sequester, and what is the rate of deforestation, right? And I think that for us, what we try to do also is to align the business model with the impact, right? And I think that a problem with many companies today is that the business model is completely disconnected from the mission, right? So I think that in our case, we want the $40 that we make as a company to be at least an order of magnitude more dollars that are made by these farmers and align with the additional carbon that is being sequestered, right? And in terms of team motivation, I mean, I think that, this, everyone who came to the team came called by the mission, right? And we try to keep that as part of our recruiting process. We test for mission alignment and values alignment, but then we also have several conversations about what can go wrong, what are the risks that we face, because even if we have the best intentions, sometimes there are unintended consequences of trying to do something at scale. So we worked with Lael. He came and facilitated a workshop with us, and that was a wonderful exercise for us to think of all the possible scenarios of how things could go wrong and what could we do to design to consider that from the very beginning of the company.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for bringing up just even talking about unintended consequences as you scale and grow, and also the effects of when our business models are so far away from the actual work that we're doing that sometimes you just don't have to worry about it, and how that leads to issues as well. Can't wait to dive more into that too. So I think that leaves us with Leo. As Diego was talking about transparency in their work, I was thinking about transparency in your work. You bootstrapped your business for some time. Can you talk more about how you've allowed, you built your business to prioritize impact over time towards the mission that you're building on?
Yeah, we bootstrapped because the world wasn't really ready, and I was listening really carefully. I mean, so trying to put transparency in supply chains means completely changing the way companies do business with each other and on a global scale. And so it takes a lot of listening. It takes a lot of working with corporates that are willing and find out what is the return on investment for them. So I think if we had tried to do a flash in the pan, we would have burned out like a lot of startups. And if we thought that this was an easy problem to solve, like you see a lot of blockchain pilots to solve supply chain transparency, it's not an easy problem to solve. It's a problem that takes, working with dozens of countries and making sure everyone can communicate and collaborate and coordinate. And then everyone has a business interest. I mean, sharing where things come from can be a big threat to people. And we knew we had to get there by getting everyone to buy in. So we were bootstrapped. We were very fortunate to find customers early on that were willing to embark on this, that believed that transparency was going to happen. We basically built it for them. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that we converted what we learned into a SaaS product that we could sell to companies no matter how mature or how much visibility they had, and turn it into that. So I would say bootstrapping was a necessity, and it's also what allowed us to build the kinds of services and technology that companies actually need to tackle such a huge problem as making their supply chain transparent.
Thank you for bringing up that point too, of sometimes when the world isn't ready for your product, you just have to bootstrap, and you can go to as many VCs as you want. They're like, we don't get it. I was just at two different events actually a few weeks ago, and at both of them there were people who talked about their interest in building more responsible tech, and for years they've been talking about it, and the world wasn't ready. And then all of a sudden people do care more about transparency and where things come from and how things get built. And it's really incredible that all of you are doing the work in this space and have been thinking about impact for so long. So opening up to everyone here, one of the questions we have is thinking about, I know some of you have touched on this too, but growth at each stage as you are mission focused, and how that might change over time, how growth affects mission, how sometimes the need for growth can cause compromises. How have you thought about growth at each stage of your organization and how that's really affect the impact or mission that you've had ahead? We can, for all three of you, we can maybe go in the same order we did before, just to keep it easy. Sophia, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to set the stage, I think rather than a trade-off, I do really truly believe impact can actually lead to accelerated growth, which I feel like we have seen at Tiny. And as mentioned, we have always led with impact, and you really do see that in everything we have done to date. I'd mentioned some of the things that we're doing, on the day-to-day as well around partnerships. But then another big piece is our packaging, which we're all almost completely plastic-free. one of the few D2C companies out there that have been able to kind of achieve that. I'm really proud of that. So our packaging is all cardboard. And, I think also kind of the way we built our product, you can see the impact, kind of we woven into it as well. When we started Tiny, we knew that there is a white space and a real need for this type of product to really help make parents' lives easier on the day-to-day. And we sent one email out to a parent group in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and literally got hundreds of people to come to the park. It was my co-founder and I, and she was 8 months pregnant at this time. So at least there was some legitimacy there, but literally came and picked up food from complete strangers. This is my life's work. And I mentioned it earlier already, like it's an honor for me to build this company and really, again, to try to be a helpful resource. And without impact what's the point for me personally? Because I do believe we're here one time on this earth. I think, again, us being in these positions of being able to build a company, and it's hard. It's hard every stage. And we're now we're just post our Series A raise a couple of months ago. So I feel like we have a little bit more scale. And I'm excited about that as well. And as mentioned, we are very much an omni-channel brand. So D2C currently, but do look to go into retail. And ultimately, as mentioned, I want to be part of the WIC program and I think that's going to really be the dream come true. I did say when we joined forces with Michelle Obama that I could retire that day, but like maybe when we're on WIC, I can do that. But
and congrats on the post Series A. And it's also so great to hear you talk about how it was part of the product, but also the whole community of parents and how to support parents as well, and how that is very interchangeable in one thing.
Absolutely. And we always say there's no stronger word of mouth than that of a mom or a parent who's convinced. So, we've definitely seen all of that.
Thank you. Diego, what about you? What about each growth stage for you?
Yeah, I think that we also recently closed our Series A, so we're in a similar stage. I think that for us, yes, it's super, really fortunate and grateful to have had the support of great investors. But as we grow as a company, and we at the end of last year we were 12 team members. Right now we're 37 team members. So really rapid growth of the team.
Wow.
And one of the things that we did this year was to articulate our values and our principles, right? And before, probably we were a small team. We didn't need to be so intentional on writing it down and communicating to the team. So now we did. And every time that we onboard, well, actually, when we are interviewing team members, we are in a way evaluating whether they share our values, right? In a more systematic way. And when we onboard team members, I give a little talk about our values and about, of course, our mission and our vision. And then we're implementing processes. We just hired our first director of people. And one of the goals is going to be for this person to help us systematize processes that ensure that we enact our values and that there is processes on how we design products, how do we make decisions about what customers do we work with, what type of projects do we accept and don't accept on the platform, and to be less, more systematic, have processes to implement the culture and impact that we want to have. And that's the only way that we can scale it as we continue to grow. But I imagine that next year, probably I'm going to tell you a new set of challenges that have to be overcome with new processes or new ideas.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Leo, you touched on this a little bit as you talked about the early days of bootstrapping. But how have you seen your org change over time with growth and at each stage?
The good news is that the DNA was really about transparency, because we've seen a lot of people talk about supply chain transparency all of a sudden very recently. But we've realized that there's been all sorts of ways to get around it historically, and if you just take an old software and try to make it about transparency, it's not actually. So luckily we have a really good DNA. Even if a company isn't concerned with deforestation or forced labor, in the process of using our software, they will ultimately find that button and they will ultimately push it, and then they will ultimately. So it's a nudging workflow. We know that mapping your supply chain will lead you to think more about other places and other cultures, and that having quantitative ways to measure the impact will direct investment. It will nudge investment in the right direction. And we've seen huge swings in how people buy things when they're presented with the right data. So I would say that the good part is the DNA was solid, and we kind of, like people ask us, oh, can you map my supply chain but not tell anybody that I'm doing it? I was like, well, that's no, actually you have to press the button. So it was a lot of careful thought at the beginning, but it's definitely something, I think everybody here, right? You have to have the KPIs for us is how many companies have we made transparent? How many first mile producers have we registered on the platform? Are we staying true to that, even as the ways we sell and who we sell to and how we sell is always evolving, but are we keeping true to those, to the DNA and to the KPIs that we really care about?
There's such also fascinating you just said about how it's helpful for consumers to see the transparent supply chain, but then it also makes it so that different companies, it's impossible for them to now ignore other cultures because our supply chains are so distributed and how we manufacture and all of that. And it'd be so interesting to learn how that's really affected the other companies too. They probably learned stuff about supply chain they probably didn't know about. And to your point, Diego, sometimes the business side of things is so separate from the build side of things and people might not even know. Do you have, just another two finger on that, have you seen scenarios where that has shifted cultures and companies as they've learned about their supply chain?
The model, look, we benefited a lot from the traditional model for sustainability, which was, certifiers and NGOs basically being sent to places and ostensibly fixing things or teaching people things. What happens when you actually create like a business instrument that connects everybody in the supply chain is frankly a lot less paternalistic. You say, oh, everybody here is a vendor, from the smallest farmer to the biggest factory, and everybody is in this network because they have commercial incentives to please their customers. And so it actually just sort of flattens the playing field, levels it, and you realize, not everybody has great HR technology and great bookkeeping technology and great risk mitigation approaches. And if we could just get the right tools to the right people, then we wouldn't have to be, catching something that happened terribly in my supply chain 6 months ago and then trying to patch it up. We can just make sure everyone's working with the same tools, the same access to information. So I think it's just leveling the playing field on a global scale.
Thank you. All right, in the last 15 minutes, I'll ask one more question for the group, and then we can end. Actually, if we have enough time, we'll fit in one more. Any advice you have for founders? So something that often a lot of early career startups, I think, ask is thinking about this trade-off, or maybe it's not a trade-off. I think, Sofia, you mentioned it's actually not a trade-off of short-term profits and term sheets and convincing your investors and all the things that comes with having investors. And how do you, how have you dealt with, or maybe not, and maybe you didn't have to, deal with trade-offs of any short-term profit or growth or anything to prove that you're worthy of funding, and what has that looked like, and how you communicate that with the external parties that one has to work with when building a startup? Sofia, do you want to start with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I could talk about fundraising for a long, long time, which I'm sure my fellow panelists could do so as well. But, the reality is obviously every investor looks at opportunities or companies differently. Not only that you have the right opportunity at the right time, but the right proof points. And, whether it's product market, we always say product market love, which we had before we launched. I mean, total market size, the opportunity, and just the growth trajectory. But even more than that, to us, what was always, or as importantly, I should say, we looked for investors, not just looking at if they could provide us capital, but really looking at their values and a mission. And we always look for mission aligned investors, and they could provide so much strategic value. And we will really feel fortunate to have incredible partners on this journey. And the food and beverage space is really interesting also. So we have both, food and beverage funds as well as consumer funds, mainly in the US, and then a few Canadian investors as well. But, I had touched on Human Ventures, who we really co-built the company with. But what really attracted us to them was the idea that they do want to solve big human challenges. And the other piece was really that they were looking for founders who don't necessarily look like a typical founder. I always laugh that my career path has kind of been somewhat nonlinear. But I've always known that I want to do something that creates lasting impact in people's lives. And but yeah, definitely. And it's also interesting too, slightly off topic in terms of the question, but like when you're raising your seed, you really are raising on the dream and the team. And then with your A, you're really raising on the metrics. So I think that's an important distinction as well. And then as you scale and get ready for your Series B, but it's definitely obviously it's a different time in a company's life. And I think, we were an all-female team up until just recently, and that I think that's also changed. Where I feel like investors really value kind of the diversity of viewpoints and perspectives, which is really fantastic to see.
Yeah, amazing. I guess one short follow-up: one question I know I hear a lot is, how do you even start to go find those funders? They might not be in the traditional funding list that everyone else has. How do you even, where do you even look?
Yeah, so for us, we had looked for funds to join us EIRs, so entrepreneurs in residence. So that's definitely one way, and it worked really well for us. I think I always say with networks, like, start building your networks. Don't wait until you need the networks, because ultimately that's ultimately what it is, and especially in the very early stages, like pre-seed. And I know the rounds, especially in the US, are bigger and bigger now if you compare to Europe. But I think we had some strategic angel investors as well that had known us for some years, and knew what we were capable of, and were kind of already, they were there, and we could present the opportunity to them. But I think that's the question that I think I get, not most often, but very often, is like, how do you get to exactly that, like with the first check? And for us, ultimately in the seed round, so Human Ventures pre-seed funded us, and then in the seed round, which I'm sure my fellow panelists will agree, but if when you find your lead investor, that really, accelerates the process as well. But yeah, I think there's so much to tackle here, even for pitch decks. And yeah, I feel like I have a lot of, insight to share, and maybe it's a time for another combo.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I mean, it's the nitty gritty of that is, I think, so important, because so many new founders are I don't even know where to look. Right. So thank you for sharing that. Diego, what about you? The not trade-off of short-term profits and convincing investors, etc.
Yeah, so I do think that there's always trade-offs. For example, in our case, some customers were asking us, hey, can we say that we're carbon neutral because we bought some carbon credits for you guys? And we were like, no, I mean, we don't know. Because to say that, you had to do a carbon footprint with an external party and then compensate your entire scope 1, 2, and 3. And we cannot tell you to do that, right? And some customers might have gone to a competitor that told them, yes, you can say that you're carbon neutral, right? So we might have lost customers, right, for ensuring that we are, of high transparency and integrity, and that we protect the credibility of what we're doing. In terms of investors, same. I was very upfront with all the investors, saying, look, this is a long-term venture. It's going to take 20 years to recover your investment. It's a mission-first company, and always profits are going to follow mission and not the other way around. And some investors turned us down. And, one investor, I remember in the first days, told us, I love what you guys are doing. It's really too long term for me. My fund requires a shorter term. And I was like, great, fine. And I understand it. No hard feelings. But I think that if you're not upfront about the things, you can get into trouble later when there is a moment of misalignment on timing or on priorities, right? So my advice would be just be upfront, be willing to lose investors and customers. And I assure you that around the corner, there is another one who's actually aligned with your vision and your timeline and your values.
Thank you for also bringing up how maybe perhaps calling all investors out there, we can normalize the longer term metrics, and that a lot of the impact in society change and changing how we eat and live just takes time. It's not, what are your 3-month results? How has this country changed its behavior? So thank you so much for sharing that. And Leo, what about you?
Well, it took a while. I only took the first round of venture capital in the middle of COVID, and that was just because everybody had to map their supply chains for every reason under the sun. Having to do with, social, environmental, or just to keep their company in business. So what can I say? The only thing I find interesting is that I think people make a lot of assumptions about big companies and whether or not they want to fix major problems in their supply chains. And I'm always in the weird position of having to explain to investors that no, this is actually, this is what they're asking me for. This is not this is a mission, but the mission is really to provide a product that giant multinationals are asking. I mean, right now we're getting requests to facilitate payments to smallholder farmers because people have been pledging for years that they were going to, eliminate extreme poverty in supply chains. And so now they're just fed up with it. And I said, well, why don't we just pay them? And I've got companies asking me to pay, but I have to convince investors. So it's, I think we need to close the loop a little faster between the, how quickly the manufacturers and brands are adopting pretty radical sustainability strategies and how quickly investors are paying attention to that. I'm just trying to get them to talk to each other more directly.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many lessons we can learn from you in a whole different talk just around having to bootstrap for a while, then all of a sudden your company is the thing that everyone needs because of so many different reasons that came together at the same time in 2020. I'm sure. There's one question I think some of you might have answered this already, but if anything that you might want to add on the balance between profitability and impact, or if you haven't felt like you've had that balance, what's your secret? How have you managed that? Any of you?
Yeah, I would say that we spent a lot of time thinking about a business model that would allow for healthy profits to make the company sustainable and to allow us to reinvest those profits on achieving the mission, right? So I do think that it's worth a while spending extra time on strategy, design thinking, on discovering a profit model that allows you to not have to be a non-profit venture, right? But that being said, every new venture at the beginning is not focused on profit, right? And this is actually the paradigm in Silicon Valley, right? Companies go public without profits, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that have an idea of how you're going to make healthy profits to sustain the mission, but be willing to know that this will take time.
Yeah. Thanks, Inigo. Sofia, Leo.
I feel like I kind of covered a lot of how we see that again, that balance at Tiny, and I think more and more people, and I think we're already seeing it happening, but I think the world will move into a place where people will, what's the saying, vote with their wallets, or really, again, I think as a company, if you don't, and it's not a CSR piece to me, again, it's the right thing to do. And I think especially maybe the younger generations, Gen Z and Alpha, especially, even more so, but millennials as well, of course, and Gen X. But I think this will become the norm very soon, as it should be. And I think we're going to see that just again in the company's performances, that where I think it's a lot of it is to do with trust as well. Like,
Yeah.
if you trust the company, and I think I think it's I think it's only a matter of time, and it's already started happening, that shift.
Yeah, I do hope it becomes a norm where profitability and impact are not as interchangeable, or that the measurement of impact it's okay to be longer term. Leo, anything to add to that?
I mean, like, I think carefully considered, but all of what the businesses that we have, right? The more good we do, we get directly paid. We get paid the more supply chains we make transparent. So it's not. So for us, there's never a compromise, and luckily for our customers and our investors too. So I think if we were billing by the hour, or we were billing by the ton, but no, we're just trying to make them transparent so that we never run into a.
Hi from BetaWorks. It's
hi, live audience.
Hi, we have a question here in the camp room, so I'm just gonna turn it to
Anna. Hi everyone, nice to meet you. My name's Anna. I wanted to ask you, what is something surprising about building an impact-driven company? Perhaps something that you didn't anticipate going in, but you've learned as a result of being on this journey.
It's a great wrap-up question. Thank you. Sure, let's go back and just do the same rounds we had, Sophia, Diego, Leah, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you. Okay.
Let's start with Diego. I got to think about this a little.
All right, Diego.
Sure. To me, the biggest surprise on the positive side was how easier it's been for me to attract incredible talent. And I think this because, as Sophia was saying, younger generation, but frankly, everyone cares deeply about climate change. So I was able to attract people from Google, Facebook, Microsoft, SpaceX, OpenAI, a long list of big tech companies. They are getting paid a lot less than in these companies at Pachama, right? And all that is because of the impact that we are going to have. So I think that was a great surprise.
And a testament to the company and mission and organizations you've built to get people to come. I've also been part of a world that I've convinced people to come work for a lot less money for the mission. And it's not always easy. So major kudos to you for what you've built, Diego. Sophia, Leo, either one of you want to go next?
Yeah, I think, we launched the business nationwide. We'd been working on it prior, but January 2020, like right into the pandemic. And I do think the pandemic accelerated behaviors that were already happening. So for our business, I think what was really just tremendous was that we partnered actually with the Food Bank of New York City, and the company was born in New York. So that was really, 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 again, going back to creating that meaningful impact. But I think what surprised me in a very positive way was, and going back to the supply chain, we had obviously massive supply chain issues for some time. And our kitchen team went to work every single day, even during March of 2020 in New York City. So, I think the kind of the grace that we were given by our customers and our parents, really, I hold dear to this day. And it's, again, a very positive surprise, but really everyone was so understanding. And to this day, we had supply chain challenges, definitely had a long tail, and we kind of are past that point now. But I think, again, this kind of empathy that we see in the world, and I have to make a quick plug for the show Ted Lasso, because I do think I was reading this article about the show, and I think that show showcases as well kind of that. I think the world in 2021 needs much more of that, and I think we were definitely being very supported by our customers, and of course, like was mentioned, the team as well. I couldn't be prouder.
As I'm listening to you, I'm hearing you say these things about how supportive these customers are and how much grace they gave. But at the same time, what I'm hearing also is how much intentional leadership you must have had during that year to launch a food supply chain company during 2020,
yes,
when many were going out of business. So congratulations for what it's worth on all of that. That's incredible.
I have a lot of stories to share from that year.
And Leah, we'd like to wrap us up.
I could just sort of reaffirm. I mean, no, keep attracting, keeping talent has been amazing with a mission. Yeah. Attracting and keeping customers, and especially over time, because you can pivot. The product can evolve, the sales and marketing can evolve, but if people know that you're always in it for the right mission, they come back. And then we've got customers that come, and even if they change companies, they bring us back into their new company. So it's just a way to very easily make everyone aligned and clear on what they're doing and why. So it's been a huge.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to be respectful of everyone's time to make sure people have a break before the 3:30 Eastern time session. But Sophia, Leo, Diego, thank you so much for being here and sharing so much of your wisdom, and also for doing the work you all are doing. So virtual round of applause. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for joining. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.